I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us here tonight on Closing Arguments. And the case everyone's talking about is drawing to a close. Timothy Ferriter accused of locking his son in an 8x8 box in the garage. There he is, day 5. The defense is set to conclude their case tomorrow, but the judge has given Timothy Ferriter one more night to decide, should I or shouldn't I, will I or won't I, get up on the stand and explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why I had that box built, why I put him in the box, and why it's not criminal. Okay, so there's been a lot of testimony in this case. There's been a lot of evidence. Let's take a listen to some of the biggest moments from the trial so we get some perspective as to where we are tonight as Timothy Ferriter has to make this big decision.
You only have to make one determination in this case, and that is whether or not Tim Ferriter had the criminal intent necessary. That's it. Did he or did he not have the criminal intent? And that will be your guiding question throughout this case.
But you're going to hear that in no circumstance is this a protective punishment for any child. And in particular, for a child who may have issues with trauma or a behavioral issue, that this is the worst possible thing that a parent could do.
This case is not about whether or not Tim Ferriter made the right choice, because I will be the first to tell you, the defense will be the first to tell you that he did not. But what it is about is the difficulty of parenting.
Did you want to be in the room?
No.
How did it make you feel?
To me, being locked in a room, it's dehumanizing. It's almost as bad as genocide.
You'd agree that when you were at their house, you would rip things and throw things?
Yes.
You want rats in here too? Eat the food. You're gonna kind of stick it in here, and you don't eat dinner. You give mom an attitude. You might rattle her a little bit because she's, cares and she tries to give you the love, but you don't fool me. You think you're a bad? You're smart. You done. I've done all the you're doing before you were born. You can't mess and fool me.
I think in your words, you intentionally broke the rules you knew about at least 5 times a week.
Usually more, but yes.
Do you remember offering a beer?
Yeah.
Yeah. And was that so you could conduct an experiment?
Yes.
How old was at the time?
Was 4.
4?
Yeah.
It's fair to say a 4-year-old should not be drinking beer that could hurt them?
That was the point of the experiment.
Did the bed have a bed frame, or what was it like?
The bed had no frame, had no box spring. It was just a mattress on the floor.
Okay. And mattress on the floor, what size of mattress was it?
The size of the mattress was a twin size.
Now, did the room have any windows or any outside light?
No.
What time would you get home from school?
Around 3:30.
And then when you would get home from school on most days, what would happen?
I'd be put back into my room.
Okay. And when you say put back into the room, are you locked in the room?
Yes.
If a child does have an attachment disorder or complex PTSD, the way the defendant acted towards the victim is the complete opposite of what anyone should have done with a child with one of those conditions, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, confining and isolating a child can exacerbate those disorders, correct?
That's right. Do you think it's hard to think of good memories when everyone around you has a bad image of Tim and Tracy in their mind?
I can easily recall the good times, but I don't have a bad image of Tim and Tracy. They just made a mistake. They just acting out of frantic surprise of my actions. They weren't. I believe that they weren't trying to do any harm.
Yeah.
I believe that I believe that people should recognize that that was a mistake and forgive them and move on.
That was the victim in the case during his testimony. Let's not forget that statement that he made. How much power does that have? So Timothy Ferriter, should he or shouldn't he? Will he or won't he? Is this a case of frustrated parents who made a bad choice? Or is this a case of abusive parents who made a criminal choice? Let's bring in our think tank tonight. Joining us in Cleveland, Ohio, retired judge, former criminal prosecutor for Cuyahoga County, and judicial fellow at the National Judicial College. Teaches other judges how to judge. Judge Gail Byers is with us. Also joining us tonight in West Palm Beach, Florida, criminal defense attorney, over 20 years experience, El Presidente of the Martin County Bar Association, Wayne Richter is with us. And in the ATL, Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, and professor of law at Texas Southern University, Michael Sterling. Great to see everyone tonight. Judge, is this a case of frustrated parents, specifically Timothy Ferriter, who's just frustrated, making bad, wrong choices in a very intense situation inside that household? Or is this a guy who is criminally abusing his son?
Well, Vinny, here's what I think, is those two things are not mutually exclusive. It's entirely possible to be a parent that makes a bad decision that's also criminal. And I think what will happen, or presumably what will happen, is the prosecutors will remind the jury of that. If they are savvy, they will remind the jurors that parents, yes, are often frustrated, but even frustrated parents who make bad decisions also make frustrated, bad, and criminal decisions, because what is going to come down to is whether or not the mens rea, or the mental state of the parents, married with an actual act, or the actus reus, to commit an offense. So you have a young man who they've adopted at a young age. They've had him in their care for a period of time. Whether or not he's received consistent therapeutic treatment to address his issues is perhaps going to be something for consideration, or something to determine. And what those parents did in response to that, and whether that response, by putting him in that 8x8 box that is literally very, very similar and tantamount to the solitary confinement we put hardened criminals through in maximum security prisons, whether or not that is equal to mere bad parenting, or if that is bad parenting with criminal behavior also attached to it. Because you can be a bad parent in prison.
Wayne Richter, the defense in her opening was very clear and trying to get this jury to focus on one issue, which is criminal intent. Their intent, and what they're arguing is, and will argue, is that his intent was not criminal. His intent was not to punish. His intent was not to abuse. His intent was to try to deal with an untenable situation and to keep his other children safe and create some order in this chaos that was exploding inside his household. What are your thoughts? I mean, in Florida, is that a proper argument to make?
Absolutely, and I think it's one that the defense is going to have to lean into and absolutely run with. I was thinking earlier today about a quote by Clarence Darrow, who says to be a good criminal defense lawyer, sometimes you've got to be outrageous. And this defense team is going to have to lean into the outrageous nature of the parenting that occurred here. And I'm not trying to convince anyone that what the Ferriters did was proper or correct. I have children, and I hate to.
And I'll tell you what, Wayne, in the opening statement, and I'm sure she'll say it in her closing argument too, the defense attorney said the same thing you're saying. And what they did was wrong. They're laying it all out there, saying what they did was wrong. They made the wrong choices, bad choices, shouldn't have been done. But their intent was, it wasn't there. That wasn't their intent was to keep everybody else safe in the house.
Correct, and I think you're going to be able to show what their intent was, because keep in mind, they have other children, right? They weren't locking up all the children in the garage. They were locking up the kid who had the disciplinary problems at school, at home. So I think they're going to have to go into that, and they're going to have to. One of the instructions here in Florida, the jury's going to be told not to decide this case based on sympathy for or against anyone. And I think the real trick for this defense goes back to not even what's occurring now or what's going to occur in closing arguments, is who did they get on this jury? Did they get people on this jury who cannot be emotional, which is hard to do? Vinny, you know this as a former prosecutor. Anytime you're dealing with victims who are children, emotions run high. But they're going to have to try to reclaim the narrative. I look at it at the bottom of the screen. It's been called the boy in a box trial. They need to let them know this is not a boy in a box. This was a boy that had a home, or a young man, we should say, not even a boy, living in the garage with air condition, being fed. He wasn't physically abused. I've looked at the photos. Looks like he has an iPad in there. Of course, it's not great, but they're going to have to get this jury to focus on this was not intentional infliction of emotional or physical abuse. It was not intentional. The point here, our goal, as misguided as it was to try to correct behavior or prevent harm to the other children.
Michael Sterling, what are your thoughts about Timothy Ferriter, thinking about whether or not he's going to testify tomorrow? Because, you know, he'll have to answer a lot of questions like, you know, you're building. You know, we spoke with the guy who actually built this box in the room, and he's telling him it's an office, right? Like, to me, that gets into as well. Like, maybe I shouldn't tell him that I'm building a box with a lock on the outside for one of my children, that he knows what he's doing isn't 100% proper or correct. What are your thoughts about him testifying and trying to explain to this jury why he did what he did?
Yeah, well, as my middle son, Mike Jr. would say, we don't talk about family business to outside people. Family business is family business. So, I mean, I think that could be one explanation for it, that his disciplinary methods, he didn't necessarily want to share with an outsider. That was, you know, something that he wanted to keep between his family. There are parents who, you know, oftentimes they do different disciplinary actions that are, you know, might depending on who you're speaking to, so you might be speaking to one parent and it might seem completely reasonable and somebody else might think it's outrageous. I had a professor in law school, a torts professor, who thought any form of corporal punishment was completely outrageous. But I grew up in a time in Texas where corporal punishment was accepted in elementary and middle schools and high schools. My basketball coaches and in my athletics, that happened all the time. So I think that, you know, I think, Vinny, there's at least a part of me that thinks that there's at least a 65% chance he's going to take the stand. Because I think that he does have some responsibility to explain it. And as you listen to, for example, the psychologist, there are things that we learn through the course of parenting. Parenting, as anybody who's a parent I am, is an imperfect art. And I think you've got to explain it that way. I think about some of the things I used to watch on TV, like the Scared Straight stuff, that we now know is probably the worst way to try to discipline and remedy a child, but we did that, and they televised it, and we watched it, and it was something we watched on TV. They would send the child to jail and have these inmates, these convicted criminals, threatening them and telling them all the things that would happen in jail, hoping to have the child avoid jail, right? And that may be something that he has to explain, right? I wanted to save his life. I want him to avoid, you know, this potential future for him, being locked in a cage in the future. And if he experienced some of it, maybe that is an explanation. I don't know, Vinny, but I think he's got to take the stand. I think there's a 65% chance that he will, to explain some of that.
So you would get corporal punishment if you didn't box your man out on your basketball team, Michael? Is that what you're telling us tonight?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, it depends, yeah.
Wow. All right, Judge, do you think he's going to testify?
I think there's going to be some very thoughtful and long conversations about whether or not he will. My bet is that he probably will. And the reason is because, just as my colleagues here said, the whole situation seems so outrageous and so unbelievable. But it also almost instantly pulls at the emotional side in favor of the prosecution, that the defense, I believe, will be very hard pressed to not want to subdue that or suppress that by hearing directly from the defendant, even if he has to endure a pretty tough cross-examination. I think they probably prepped him very, very well. He knows what those recordings sound like. These are not a surprise to him. All of this was exchanged during discovery.
Oh, I think.
Perhaps stoic face because he's not surprised.
All right. We lost the last couple words, but I think we're good for the rest of the show. So, by the way, I think he has to testify because we've been watching him, and all we know about him is that screaming on those tapes. He needs to humanize himself because you look at him in the courtroom, he's not showing much emotion. He could be the nicest guy in the world. I don't know. I don't know him. But from where I'm sitting, and I think from where the jury's sitting, he's been extremely stoic. The hair is perfectly gelled every day. Like, is this guy human? If so, he's got to explain what he was going through, what his family was going through, and what he feared for his other children, for the jury to understand it. Otherwise, I don't see any defense. And even if he does, I don't know if it's a defense, but I think it's the only way that the jury could give him any benefit of any sort of doubt in this case. But we'll see. We'll see. It's always up to him. Tomorrow morning, right here. Tune into Julie Grant's show.